Oh boy, do we have a controversial video today. I'm gonna talk about BFA. Wait, this is controversial now? Well damn. I look away for 1 second and the sky starts falling. Did you guys know that Blizzard is awful, the game sucks, and if you like it, you're a mindless fake fanboy shill and not a true OG gamer? And at the same time, those people are just whiners and they should just quit, and how dare they be critical of the game. Streamers are angry, YouTubers are angry, the players are angry, everyone's angry. It's one of those old MTV reality TV shows where everyone's screaming at each other and pulling out each other's weeds.
I think original chicken.
As for myself, my spirit animal is the guy in the background eating Taco Bell, watching it all transpire. I haven't really shared my opinion yet, because I think these videos are all over the place, and I've just had other things I wanted to do. But people have asked here and there about my thoughts on BFA, so I think it's time. And just to throw this out there, this is all just my opinion, and if you disagree with what's said in this video, that's fine. I'm not trying to sway anyone in any direction, I'm just sharing my honest thoughts and impressions of the expansion so far. This isn't coming from someone who plays 14 hours a day and complains that there's nothing to do, nor from someone who plays once a week and has no idea what's going on. I've always considered myself the pretty average everyday player in this game, aside from vanilla back when I played way too much. These days, I play every other day, and rating-wise, the most I'll do is heroic. Expanding on that though, I definitely haven't played BFA as much as I did Legion. In Legion, I was online pretty much every day, and running mythics left and right, leveling new alts, and much more active in raiding and so on. I think that's because A, I really loved Legion. After the disaster that was Draenor, I thought it really revitalized the game, and it brought so many new features to the table. I liked the story, most of the raids, the dungeons, the artifacts, pretty much everything about it. BFA, however, I've had less playtime in, I think simply due to its new main features, which are Warfronts, Expeditions, and Azerite armor, just haven't felt as fun to me compared to what Legion brought to the table. I don't think BFA as a whole is terrible or unfun. I still have fun running mythics, and I think the raids are great so far, and I've actually delved into PvP a bit this expansion, which is something I've neglected since Cataclysm. Overall, so far I'd say it's an average expansion, but therein lies the problem. World of Warcraft is the first thing that comes to mind when someone says MMO. We hold the game to the incredible standards that we know Blizzard is capable of, yet it's received a lukewarm reception at best because it's very average. So that's the too long didn't watch of it. I do want to go into more detail though, and explain exactly why I feel this way, and the main way I want to express that is just by going over those major features one by one. What does this expansion bring to the table that's different from the others? And after that, we'll just talk about it as an MMORPG as a whole. This video was made in April of 2019, so about 8 months into the expansion, just after 8.1.5, so this is before the upcoming Crucible of Storms and Ashar's Eternal Palace raids. So I think one of the main problems that everyone has right now is that it simply boils down to it's very similar to Legion gameplay-wise. What you grind, how you grind, your daily itinerary, it's all very reminiscent of the Legion expansion, and the new features I just mentioned have fallen short in a lot of ways. To really get my point across here, I think it's appropriate to draw comparisons to Legion since it's the direct previous expansion. As I said, I loved it. It introduced Mythic Plus and brought 5-man content to the endgame challenge-wise. World quests are a much better alternative to that old daily quest hub system that they had. The zones were good. I personally liked artifact weapons because they gave you another form of character progression and a long-term goal to work towards. Like I said, the story was interesting to me, and most of the raids were great, and the dungeons were designed well, and they were fun to play. And the legendaries, although they had their flaws in their method of obtainment, I thought that their various unique perks that they gave added depth to the classes. There were so many great new features that really turned the game around. A huge improvement over Draenor, although that's pretty easy to do, right? Here comes BFA though. With all of those huge new features from Legion, what great heights will this one take us to? With artifacts disappearing, we have the new Azerite system. Now, there are differences. You don't get every trait, rather you have to choose just one at each tier. You also have 3 pieces of armor that you can interchange instead of being stuck with just your weapon, with each armor having different combinations of traits for each of your specs. But even with this, at the end of the day, it boils down to you collect artifact power to level up your amulet, which in turn lets you pick more traits for your gear, which is what we had in Legion. It's not the exact same system, but it is very similar, just dressed up a bit different, which a lot of people don't like, I think. Personally, that itself doesn't bother me. What I don't like about Azerite armor is that the traits are pretty boring, and they aren't enough for what they replaced. At BlizzCon 2017, they were hyped up to be these game-changing traits similar to talents, where they heavily alter your playstyle.
Each piece of armor, in a handful of slots that we select, we currently have 3 in mind, will offer a potential for customization and choice in a handcrafted way. These are not random traits, unlike the Nether, like Crucible. A helm is a helm is a helm, and you can pick what you want to suit your playstyle, to suit your needs as you progress through the world.
So, maybe if you have this trait, you can stand in the fire a bit longer and heal the tank, or maybe this one makes you more mobile. But what we got were basically a bunch of inconsequential passives. Increase some secondary stat for 10 seconds on this proc, chance to proc a bleed, chance to proc a heal, and yes, even just straight up stat increases if you can actually believe that.
You might find a power that makes you think twice about using a talent that you'd previously written off. And you will certainly find combinations that reinforce your favorite way to play your character.
It all boils down to the problem that they've been having for 14 years back with the old talent tree. There's no real choice, because there'll always be a best, and that's the case with these traits. They're so inconsequential that they really just boil down to another number. Like, oh snap, I procced Blightborn Infusion, guys. What am I gonna do? Well, nothing, since it's just another one of the dozens of proc-based stat increases. Again, for the most part, there are a few here and there that do actually change what you do. They're extremely limited though. In fact, the only one I can think of off the top of my head is the Seductive Power trait, where you have to run to Bwamsamdi's Spirit to get a stacking buff. Although it is minor, this actually has some consequence with your gameplay. But again, it's so few and far between that your decision 99% of the time is based off of the highest number in a spreadsheet. The scenario is, which one is higher? Oh, okay, I'll pick that one, rather than what it should be and what was promised, and that's which one is more fun or better fits my playstyle. And another issue is in regards to what they're replacing. Artifacts were hugely impactful in Legion, game-changing in fact. In the beginning of Legion, as you may remember, we had a huge pruning of abilities. Skills or passives that were deemed unfit for class fantasy were removed, or just restricted to one specialization of the class, leaving things much more simple in comparison to Draenor. With the introduction of artifacts though, a lot of these gaps were filled with new traits, passives, and even abilities that made the class feel more whole. However, as I mentioned, we lost artifacts in BFA, and they're basically replaced with Azerite armor. Some, not all, of the old abilities were instead thrown into the talent tree as an option against existing talents, but everything else, gone. For the most part, there are some exceptions, but overall, our net gain from Draenor to BFA is negative. So, you have this big void left, and the system that was supposed to fill it in has fallen short in many people's eyes. A problem made worse with the fact that there are no tier sets in BFA because of Azerite armor. Just another casualty of the system. As stated by Ian Hazakostas in a November 2017 interview. Tier sets of course need the head, shoulders, and chest, but since those slots are filled by Azerite armor, they just decided to do away with them, citing that people would get their customization through the Azerite armor. The last resort to filling the void left behind the removal of artifacts, gone. And not only that, but also the Legion legendaries, and are missing level 120 talent row. Artifacts, tier sets, legendary affixes, new talents. Players have lost so much since Legion, and they've been replaced by, increase your mastery and leech. Even if it was perfectly designed, one system can't possibly emulate the customization, depth, and impact of 4. And to add on to that, to start off, a lot of the good traits weren't even the class-specific ones. In general, I hate traits that are shared between the classes. Although it had its own flaws, I could see where they were coming from with the class fantasy revolution during Legion. Make the classes and specializations stand out from each other. Not just for the sake of making alts more interesting, but just for the sake of having something that no one else but your spec has. We have a whole ring that's dedicated to these generic traits for every single spec. Again, for how big of a deal that they made about class fantasy in Legion, this really doesn't make sense to me. And speaking of this, expanding more in tier sets here, to a lot of people, these are the holy grail of raiding in World of Warcraft. One of the huge reasons that people raid to begin with is for the tier sets. To have something to complete, and to get those cool set bonuses to make their class more interesting or powerful. They're what separates Mythic Plus from raiding now, since you can get pretty comparable eye levels from both. Especially if you don't count Mythic raiding, since I think like 2% of the population actually does that. And even more so, because Mythic Pluses are spammable, and with the advent of Titan Forging, you really can outgear raids. Even Mythic raids if you do enough. It's grindy, yeah, but it's possible. Like I said, I think Mythic Pluses are great for the game, but in my opinion, raiding should always be the mainstay primary endgame for any MMO, and with no tier sets, that line between raids and Mythic Plus becomes even more blurred. And that's not even getting into the aesthetics of it. Another reason why people want tier sets is for the looks or for collection's sake, and now we're left with this awkward system of sharing these quote sets of the same armor type. Every leatherware looks the same, every clothware looks the same, and so on. Gee, for how big a deal they made about class fantasy during Legion with all of the pruning, this sure seems contradictory, doesn't it? Raise your hands, how many of you have actually seen the full Uldir or Dazzler lore sets on people? Everyone I know transmogs out of them, not because they're objectively ugly, but rather because they're simply shared across every armor type, so they're no longer unique. Or rather, they don't match their class. Like, how does this look like a rogue, or this a hunter? Some people say that looks don't matter, but if that's the case, how about we just have one armor set so everyone looks the same? How about we're all just gray blobs with no distinguishable features? Why have separate classes? We should all just look the same and just have one ability. I'm obviously joking here, but you have to admit that there is some truth to what I'm saying. There is value in straightforwardness, but sometimes I think they just take it way too far, especially in an MMO setting where the whole genre is about that complexity and character progression. Change is inevitable. You can't reasonably expect a game to never evolve, but in my opinion, in certain aspects, it's done so in a destructive way. Evolution should be constructive, with more features and depth added, not taken away. I think the game has done a great job with this in areas like dungeons and raids. Huge improvements over the years, and when people trash BFA, they conveniently seem to never talk about these new raids and boss fights, which I think are well done. Gone are the days of having 5 different salamander boss fights that are all slightly different from each other. The latest one, as of this video, is the Battle of Dazzler Lore, and it's phenomenal. The fights are so fun and unique, and it might be my favorite raid in the entire game, and for someone who's played since 2005, that's saying a whole hell of a lot. But where they have an A+ in the raiding scene and dungeons, there has been some definite regression in a lot of the details, such as the lack of tier sets, or no new talents like I mentioned earlier. It feels like we're losing the RPG in MMORPG. It would be unbelievable to remove tier sets from the games, say during the Wrath of the Lich King or Burning Crusade or whatever, but in today's climate, it's more acceptable since it's just another one of the many things that they've slowly whittled away. It's the little things that matter, and they all build on each other, and when you start slowly taking them out expansion by expansion, you start seeing the effect. Tier sets are just one of many victims, and it's all for the sake of a system that's been less than impressive from a design standpoint, from a character progression standpoint, and even from just a raw gameplay standpoint. And that's not even the end of it. They're still rebalancing these traits all the time, which is good. I mean, you're never going to get perfect balance like I mentioned, but the bigger issue is that it creates situations like this. Since they changed these traits so much, everyone hangs on to like 50 Azerite pieces, and each patch we go through them to see what's good and what's bad this week. Sometimes, even if a piece is 30 eye levels under another piece, it's still better because it just has better traits in general, which should never be the case. So, those are my general thoughts on Azerite armor as a whole, I think. Like I said though, I want this video to be constructive, and credit where credit is due, they have been addressing the Azerite armor. They added another ring that has the class traits in their pool, which gives a bit more added depth, and just having another layer is nice in general. And they've also removed a lot of the boring or useless ones, and they even added a currency where you can buy specific pieces from any Mythic Plus dungeon. They've also said that they're looking to make substantial changes to the system as a whole in patch 8.2. As of this video, there's not a lot of detail, but they hinted that they're moving a lot of the power to the amulet itself, possibly bringing in active abilities, and overall making them more similar to the Legion artifacts. If that's true, and we have something as substantial as active abilities, we'll finally have something closer to what was promised in BlizzCon 2017. But please, Blizzard, I beg of you, make these abilities spec-specific. A new poison for assassination rogues, maybe a new demon for warlocks, I don't know. It'll be hard to balance, but after losing artifacts and tier sets, class identity is something that's regressed so much, and this is your opportunity to address it. If it's a generic one-spell-fits-all classes type of deal, I think it'll be following down the same path that led you to all of these problems to begin with. So I'm hoping that all of these changes will be good, but like I said earlier, when you're trying to force one system to replace 4, it's an uphill battle to say the least. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But next, let's talk about another big BFA feature, and those are the island expeditions. I think these could also use some work. There are some good aspects to them. The advanced AI is really well done, I think, and they're role agnostic as they should be, so they're easy to just hop in and do. Right now, the biggest problem is that the main thing they're banking on, which is it's a different experience each time, isn't really true. I mean, it's technically true. Technically, there are different mobs, or chest placements each time, or different quests, or an opposing team, and so on, but at the end of the day, they boil down to this. Rush to get X amount of Azerite before the enemy team does. You never really can stop to look around or notice any of the changes because you're just constantly rushing to go get Azerite. Even the different maps, because there's really no difference between them. A problem made by the randomness itself. Let me explain. Now, some islands do have set enemies here and there, but a lot of them, such as the rares or invasions, are from a larger pool that are selected randomly. If 90% of the expeditions are random, what's the real difference between the maps? It's all just topography and aesthetics. There's a hill here instead of there, or maybe this rune is in that location, and it's compounded by the fact that most of the maps right now are on these tropical islands. I know they're called island expeditions, but one of the downsides is that there's not much variety in the setting. Yeah, there are certain spots where there's fire in the Molten K or the foggy rotting mire, but these islands are varied enough themselves that they just sort of blend in together. Like, there's no real fire map that's brimming with fire elementals, or lava spewing everywhere, or flame walls that you have to dodge. Instead, we have an island with some fire, an island with some snow, and an island with some buildings, and so on. I think if the maps had more of an identity, you could maybe say that you get more variety between expeditions. Like, imagine if Mythic Plus dungeons had a random assortment of enemies, random trash mobs, and in every boss room is a random boss from any of the 10 dungeons in BFA. Take that, and instead of each of these dungeons having these unique settings, just make them all take place on tropical islands. What's there to make you say that, oh neat, a freehold key, that's my favorite one? Or, ugh, Shrine of the Storm? Oh, forget that. If they're instead these ultra-random mishmashes, they wouldn't truly have anything that sets them apart from each other. When have you ever done an island expedition and you went, oh yeah, the Molten Cave baby, my favorite, yes! In my opinion, it results in them being kind of dull, because once you've done one island expedition, you've pretty much done them all. I think if we maybe had something to anchor all of these islands to something identifiable, it would make for a more memorable experience. Like, say the ice level has all ice enemies, and not only that, but there are also these flash blizzards that give you a stacking debuff that you have to get rid of by taking cover in a cave and kill less lucrative enemies inside, or you can risk it by finding materials to build a campfire that gives you a buff that lets you weather the storm for a bit. This would set it apart from the others, and at the same time, fix that problem of not really having any strategy other than rush, rush, rush. Maybe for the city map, the quirk is pickpockets will constantly spawn trying to steal your Azerite. They don't attack you, they just wait until you're in combat or something, and they stealth up and steal 100 or so Azerite and start running away. If you don't kill them within 10 seconds, they vanish along with that Azerite. Make each map a unique and memorable experience like this, to where if you get it in the queue, you're like, oh cool, it's this one. As for the reward structure, at first it was pretty poor. You either got doubloons, sometimes a pet, and sometimes nothing. Just some Azerite, which you can get from basically any other activity in the game. This is still largely the same, but they did add a vendor where you spend those doubloons for some goodies, finally adding some structure to the reward system, and giving players long-term goals to work towards, instead of rolling the dice every run and praying to the RNG gods. And in regards to the balance and pace, to try and make people deviate from the rush 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 strategy, they have extraction points for you to defend, so there's actually a benefit in slowing down every once in a while, and giving players decisions of attacking or defending. They also have the new treasure map system. If you fill up your weekly bar, you get a treasure map, which unlocks a bonus table mission that can have Azerite, amount, residuum, gold, and so on, chosen at random. Again, an improvement, but at the end of the day, it's just another random reward. Everything is so random these days. PvP gear, Titan forging, caches. What happened to this? I thought this was alright. Some randomness is good, as it adds replayability, but if your whole game is based off of caches and Titan forging, it tends to get a bit too grindy, and frustrating if the RNG gods happen to have it out for you. Equipment caches have really taken over the game at this point, and I think they would benefit greatly from introducing a badge system similar to what they had in the Burning Crusade or Wrath of the Lich King days. But back on topic here, island expeditions. Like I said, they're not bad, they're just not great either, at least in my opinion. I think if they made each map more unique and added more structure to the reward system, more people would run them. Moving on here though, another big feature are the Warfronts. Now, the actual gameplay of Warfronts isn't bad in my opinion. You collect resources, recruit troops, take capture points, and take down the enemy commander in a battle that's reminiscent of the old RTS games that we all know and love. Gameplay-wise, they're alright. My issue with them is the fact that you can't lose them, because what happens then is it just becomes a mindless zerg, where if you do bad, it just takes longer to win. In fact, it's quite common to go a whole round without anyone uttering a single word in raid chat, because there's no need. You may as well be playing with bots. What's the point of playing any game if you can't possibly lose? You ever see that Twilight Zone episode where the guy thinks he's in heaven because he never loses and everything goes his way?
14 red, Rocky is hot tonight, am I right, y'all?
Money, fame, and women. He has it all. But after a few months of this, he finds out that it's actually hell because his life becomes so boring.
No, I mean it. It's just somebody must have goofed. If I gotta stay here another day, I'm gonna go nuts!
All of his whims and wishes are immediately satisfied, and there's no real challenge or thrill left in his life.
Whatever gave you the idea you were in heaven, Mr. Valentine? This is the other place!
In the case of Warfronts, there's no real obstacle to overcome because eventually you'll win. In fact, there's a big problem with people just AFKing the whole round. You'll still win, don't get me wrong, but it just takes a bit longer. To prove this, I did one whole round where I did nothing but jump. I was never called out, and I was never kicked, because it never mattered. No one noticed, and we won anyways. I do feel a bit bad about it, but it brings to light their biggest issue, and that's the fact that they need to be losable. If there's no challenge, it's just a chore. You ever play with cheat codes in the old Final Fantasies back in the day? You max out your characters, they one-shot everything, and you have all of the ultimate weapons, every magic spell, and nothing can touch you. It's fun, right? Well, it's fun for about 10 minutes until you realize you're just pressing buttons. There's no actual thought or decision making going on. A game isn't a game if there's no possible way that you can lose. So that's my main gripe with the Warfronts themselves. Their actual gameplay is alright. I just wish that there was some real opposition, and I think they'd be way more fun if you actually had to plan things out and formulate a strategy rather than just mindless zerging. It just begs to have a PvP option available. The expansion's whole focus is Alliance versus Horde, so let us kill some actual players, and at the same time bring in that danger of losing. It's two birds with one stone. There are issues outside of them right now as well. This has been improved a bit in 8.1 with the addition of the Darkshore Warfront, but by themselves they're 75% in action and just waiting for them to start, which also ties into how they were released. For those who don't know, the Warfronts work in stages of 4. The Alliance controls the keep, and the Horde gathers resources to launch an attack, and once they finish that, they can do the actual scenario for 1 week. They're successful, so they take it, and now the Alliance gathers resources, and then finally, the Alliance can do the scenario. If you're only playing one faction, for 3 of these 4 stages, you're just looking at progress bars. The scenario is playable for a week, like once a month. And yeah, I know about the benefits of controlling the keep, but the actual Warfront is what we're all interested in. The world boss, rares, and turn-ins are all stuff we've seen for 14 years. From a pure gameplay standpoint, we care about the actual scenario where you gather resources and take bases. So when BFA released and we only had one, it was so slow moving that it took months before the Alliance could even do the scenario since the Horde started in that phase. For a feature that was advertised and hyped up as one of the main things in BlizzCon 2017, it just seems wrong that it took a couple of months before one side even got to see it. And a problem that made it even worse was the fact that they were unlocked on the 4th of September, which was the 4th week of the expansion. In my opinion, they should have come out after the 1st week of the expansion at the very latest, considering how slow moving they are. Now, they said that the reason for why they're so slow is eventually they're going to have multiple Warfronts, so there won't be such a huge gap, which is true now, but back then they should have accounted for that. Up until that second Warfront got released, I thought that they should have sped up the rate at which the non-Warfront stages progress, so you're not just waiting for 75% of the time. The first month of any expansion is crucial, and you gotta blow people away to get them to stick around, and they kind of dropped the ball in regards to Warfronts. But here comes 8.1. We got the Battle for Darkshore, which is a whole new Warfront that runs concurrently with the Battle for Stromgarde, thus solving that issue of them being slow moving and 75% in action. And in 8.2, we're getting a heroic mode that'll be much more difficult than normal Warfronts. And hey, they're even losable. A losable game mode? That's crazy talk. I'm still wanting a PvP mode, but hey, these are good changes that solve pretty much every issue that I have with Warfronts. But that does bring up another point. For all of these features, I've said that, oh, they improved this in 8.1, or they're going to add this aspect in 8.2. That's all well and good, but let's talk about the here and now. 8.1 was released 4 months after BFA's launch, and that heroic mode is 8.2, which who knows when that'll drop. As players, we expect these features to be fully tested and optimized at release, not piece by piece in content patches. So, in the current game, with Azerite armor, island expeditions, and Warfronts all having their flaws, BFA doesn't bring many new things to the table. People aren't as active in these game modes, and they regress to the bare-bones MMO gameplay, such as dungeons and raiding, and you're really left with a very similar experience to Legion. Your daily itinerary is world questing, grinding loot for mythic keystones, and once a week raiding without raid sets. And if they happen to be your cup of tea, you have expeditions and Warfronts. If they're up, that is. The story is gated, just like Legion, and in 8.1 we got the new incursion feature, which is just like the demon invasions from Legion. A zone comes under attack, you do 4 world quests, and then a finale. The expansions look almost identical in a lot of ways, and with how many new features Legion brought to the table, BFA seems kind of underwhelming for a lot of people in comparison right now. It is good that they've been addressing this stuff in these patches, but I think there are some little things that they could do as well that would go a long way. When was the last time we saw a new row of talents? Was that in the Warlords of Draenor? The old trees, with how much people deride them, at least let you slowly improve and customize your character level by level. With monsters scaling with you as you level and no new talents, you have to ask yourself the question, what's the actual point of leveling? Where it used to be its own journey, it's now just an obstacle to overcome to get to the endgame, and a vessel to force-feed players the story of the expansion to set the narrative. It's like I mentioned earlier, the smaller details by themselves may seem minor, but if you slowly chip away things, they add up. Adding another row of talents honestly isn't even a little thing. Class balance is never as simple as add more, but it would give us something that's long overdue and relieve some of the tremendous pressure from the back of the failing Azerite system. Listen, I don't pretend to have all the answers. I'm not a developer. I don't know what goes on behind the scenes, and there are probably very good reasons for a lot of these problems BFA is facing, but at the end of the day, problems are problems, and they still need fixing. So, even through all of this, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I'm enjoying the expansion for what it is. I think the stuff that it did well, they did really well. I'm pretty much addicted to the dungeons in BFA, and I'm always down to run some Mythic Plus. Even if I don't need them for gear or anything, I just like running them with my friends. I'm loving the story, and the first 2 raids seem to have hit the mark. The fights have impeccable design and quality that only Blizzard can achieve. My favorite ones in particular are Mother and Uldir, and either Mekatork or Jaina in Azure lore. It's hard for me to decide. And outside of that, I think their war mode was also a stroke of genius. I think it really revitalized PvP, and the way they have the PvP talent set up where you can gain some added power and experiment with the new perks even out in the world just questing is a really good design. Like I said, I haven't touched PvP really since Cataclysm, and in BFA, I find myself going out of my way to world PvP, and even arena here and there. It adds a new danger to the otherwise mundane world questing, and I've had a lot of fun and memorable battles against the Horde. And with the incursions sort of forcing everyone together, it makes for quite a hectic time. I have a feeling that this video will get a lot of hate, and that's fine. Again, it's just all opinions. If you personally enjoy every aspect of BFA, more power to ya. Like I said, overall I like BFA and I still play it. It's just not as much as I would be since the issues I mentioned have put a damper on my experience personally. I don't want this video to give you the impression that it's worse than Draenor, or the game is dying like many would have you believe. Listen, people have been saying that the game has been dying ever since the Burning Crusade. Some of you veterans may remember just how controversial that was. What the heck? You mean to tell me that all of the gear we worked 2 years for will be useless by level 65? What a ripoff. Way to jump the shark, Blizzard. You know, I hear that this new game called The Lord of the Rings Online is coming out. Everyone says it's gonna be a WoW killer, so I'll see you guys on the other side. I really meant Age of Conan there. Or maybe Warhammer Online? No, I meant Star Wars The Old Republic. It seems like 100 of these supposed WoW killers have come and gone, but through it all, the World of Warcraft always seems to pull through. We do still have a lot of time to spend with BFA, so I don't think anyone can conclusively say that it's good or bad yet. A lot can happen in 2 years, and although some of this stuff got off to a rocky start, I have faith that they can turn it around and make it into a great expansion. I really do. Hey, I played through all of Draenor. If that doesn't tell you how much love I have for this game, I don't know what will. I think it all really hinges on how they address the Azerite armor system. Expeditions and Warfronts are kind of tertiary at the end of the day if you think about it. They're just side activities to do when you're bored. Azerite armor, however, is so important because it's your character progression for the expansion. As I've said many times, character progression is so important for MMOs. I really can't say it enough. It's the reason why anyone does anything in the game, whether it be gearing up, getting those mounts, investing talent points, earning PvP rank, or whatever. If they can save this, I think they can save the expansion. But that's about it. Hopefully this video didn't come off as negative, because that wasn't the goal. These are just my honest thoughts about a game as a player who's been playing since March of 2005. I've actually been working on this video for over a month, trying to approach it from a calm and fair perspective, and I'm hoping I did just that. Don't take it too seriously. You gotta live with that mindset. Opinions are like buttholes. Everyone has one.
Farewell for now, mortals. We hope you enjoyed today's video. See you again soon.